Hey guys, I wanted to shoot some quick info-dense videos and take a break from the really production-heavy stuff so I can get some information out. Today I want to talk about W12 engine reliability. The W12 engine, largely due to small production numbers, especially in North America, is a bit of a mystery to potential buyers and mechanics. So I just wanted to shed some light on some of the long-standing myths about this really long-standing, unique engine. The joke has always been for the Phaeton and the D3 W12 that any service begins with an engine removal. It's a funny anecdote, but it's not really the truth. The W12 was created in order to fit 12 cylinders plus an all-wheel drive transaxle in the engine bay. By the time you stuff 6 exhaust manifolds on each side and 4 catalytic converters behind the engine, you really start to run out of space. While the W12 is shorter than the V8, it's wider. So stuffing it in the Phaeton and the D3, and in Europe the D2, really took up any available space in these platforms. Although this is the case, the W12 is actually one of the most reliable engines that Volkswagen Auto Group has ever created. There's no Achilles heel other than its lack of space and access to ancillaries. When the D3 and the Phaeton were new in the US and under warranty, they were pretty scary for anyone to work on that wasn't a factory-trained tech. The only info repairs was the factory manual. German manufacturers have a real obsession for methodical and complete disassembly for repair. This is great when money and time are no object, but as cars started to fall outside of warranty and you took your A8 W12 to Audi for a check engine light that pointed to an O2 sensor and they quoted you for an engine removal, it would be pretty reasonable that it's a pretty bad day. What was happening inside the cramped bays of the early W12 cars was a lot of heat. This caused inexpensive parts like O2 sensors, camshaft position sensors, and vacuum lines to fail, which led to really expensive labor charges for really inexpensive parts. The only way to get to these parts was through that really methodical removal of the engine. As time went on and more savvy mechanics have gotten a hold of the W12 through ingenuity and frankly the necessity to save money, it's given birth to new tactics which, not as simple as working on some other engines, they do end up bringing labor time and cost back down to a realistic area. Largely, it's the items on the back of the engine that are the most difficult to get to. For the D2, D3, and Phaeton, the false firewall butts up right up to the back of the engine, gets about an open hand's width of space between the engine and that false firewall. There's not really any room at all to get your finger and thumb to work on any repairs back there. The trick here is to either lower the subframe a little bit or loosen the engine mount so that you can move the engine around in the bay. With these two little tricks and a little bit of patience, you can get room to repair things like the cam position sensor on the back of the engine and the dreaded O2 sensor. On my own D3 W12 with about 125,000 miles, I've had the normal mix of usual repairs under the hood, like an O2 sensor and a camshaft position sensor. In my experience, I would say the Phaeton is probably the most difficult to work on. I've never worked on a D2 W12 as they were never sent to North America, but the D3 does have that little bit more space in the bay. Now, fast forward to the D4 chassis, and now we have a removable bulkhead at the rear of the engine, and it's a completely different ballgame. Suddenly, access is no longer an issue all around the engine, and it's beautiful. Despite being a bit more complicated with that fuel injection system, the 6.3-liter W12 in the D4 seems to, 1, be even more reliable, and 2, suffer less from heat soak within the engine compartment. There's so much space around this engine that you can practically fit your head around the entire block, let alone fit a hand in there to perform any repairs that might come up, especially on that back of the engine. Now, this is true for the entire range of D4 engines, including the V6 and V8, so it's a real level up. But what the W12 holds over the venerated 4-liter V8 used in so many VAG products, is that nothing needs servicing or repair along the sides of the engine. The 4-liter V8, on the other hand, requires complete engine removal to perform carbon cleaning because those intake manifolds run right along the side of the heads and butt up against the frame rails. Space is non-existent. Suddenly, the V8, with its laundry list of issues like an oil separator failure, coolant leaks between the heads, oil screens getting clogged, turbo failures, downpipe vibrations, cylinder 5 misfires, bad motor mounts, and lack of space, suddenly becomes the less economical choice versus the W12. So let's talk about the most popular misconception about the W12. And as it belongs to VAG's portfolio, and perhaps rightfully so, there's tons of skepticism about the cam timing setup in the W12 because it is also chain driven and placed on the back of the engine just like the famous B6 S4. There have been a handful of VAG engines that have fallen prey to consistent chain failures, required an engine out service like the early chain-driven 4.2 and the 3.2 V6 because of the way that VAG designs engines. One thing the W12 does not have in common with those engines, though, is a fully plastic chain guide, nor do they have the SAC stamped chain links. Those two issues alone were the cause of the majority of chain failures. The good news is, historically for the W12, a chain failure is a very uncommon occurrence. With one caveat though, the early twin-turbo Bentley W12s. They have been known to have some chain issues, so if you do look at early W12 Bentleys, proceed with caution for the Continental GT and the Flying Spur. In Europe, where the W12 is far more common, it's a regular occurrence to find 300 and 400,000 kilometers on the W12 with no issue. I've seen a handful of 200,000 mile plus D3 W12s and Phaetons in the US and 180,000 mile D4 here, all running like a sewing machine. So, as a prospective buyer or mechanic, what should you expect from W12 reliability? You should expect that the engine itself be perfectly happy with nothing more than fluids and filters, spark plugs at the recommended intervals, and the odd coil pack very occasionally. Issues with ancillaries will pop up here and there, a sensor here and there, and the D4 is direct injected, so it does need to be carbon cleaned. For carbon cleaning, I recommend a car with 60 to 80,000 miles or more should be inspected for buildup. The intake manifold needs to be removed to carbon clean, but it's painfully simple to remove. A handful of bolts in the middle, take off the oil separator, and you're in there. I have a write-up available for this, and we'll be shooting a video doing a carbon clean on a D4 W12 very soon. The thermostat is another common issue on early D4 W12s. It's located on the front top center of the engine, and it couldn't be more convenient to change. Audi posted a TSB, and there's a repair kit to fix it. On my own D4 here, with a bit over 120,000 miles, I have replaced the thermostat and carbon cleaned, and that's the extent of unscheduled maintenance under the hood. The D3 and the Phaeton, with its restricted space at the back, does have a couple challenging coolant lines that with age can deteriorate, but again, with some critical thinking and patience, the engine can stay in the car and space made for most repairs. So looking back at each engine from VW and Audi, with the frequency required for repairs for each, the W12 does quickly move itself to the top of the list of most reliable VAG engines, complete opposite of what the internet will have you believe. While they're viewed as complicated monsters, the reality is that they're a beautifully simple solution to a packaging problem. They're wonderfully charismatic to drive, they're smooth enough to balance a coin on, they have a dead flat torque curve that pulls hard from idle to redline, and shockingly reliable. They're hand built, they have much less stress per cylinder and liter than basically all other VAG engines. The only problem that you'll have is finding one with such low production numbers. As with any engine or car, especially a German one, this obviously isn't a pass to admit due diligence on researching maintenance history when buying, and consistent care while you're owning. Oil changes every 10,000 miles is incredibly important, no more, no less, proper warm-up and cool-down procedures, and not taking too many short trips without getting the oil hot. If you do have a regular short commute, then Italian tune-up and getting the oil hot and reaching redline occasionally will be important for the longevity of the W12. But that's it for now. More hopefully useful W12 info at my channel. Also, I've launched a community for W12 owners at W12ownersclub.com where there'll be tons of info posted as time permits. Thanks for watching.